A beloved husband enjoying his golden years is found gunned down in his home.
Oh, God, he's dead. There's blood on the pillow.
His watch and wallet were missing. We felt that robbery could have been a motive.
His elderly widow suspects a mystery man she saw lurking in the neighborhood.
She did tell us about a suspicious person that she saw.
He looked kind of like that man that comes by here and somebody gets some money from my husband.
Could he have showed up and done this homicide while she was out?
But when shocking secrets surface, investigators find themselves chasing an unlikely culprit and a master manipulator with a deadly past.
She went by different aliases. She had different social security numbers.
She didn't want any of us to tell her secrets, to be exposed.
When you dig into all the facts and all the details, you start to see him just a monster.
In a matter of a second, she would be the devil himself.
July 20th, 2016. At approximately 7:20 a.m., North Carolina police receive a frantic call from an Aberdeen resident named Frankie Kellis.
Moore County 911. I think my husband's dead.
How old is he?
72. Oh, God, he's dead. There's blood on the pillow.
On the 911 call, she did seem out of breath, kind of like frantic. So that's when everyone started responding to the residents.
The dispatcher instructs Frankie to try to attempt CPR on her husband, but Frankie tells the dispatcher she's 80 years old, has limited mobility.
Okay, we need to get him on the floor.
I'm not able. I'm disabled. I can't lift him.
Okay, are you able to grab his feet and pull him towards you?
I try. Honey, I can't do it. I can't. I'm just not able.
Unfortunately, by the time first responders arrive, it's too late to save her husband, Dallas.
It was obvious that he was not here anymore. He was deceased.
When EMS began trying to render aid, they realized there was blood on the pillow. So they started looking for the source of the blood, and they noticed an injury on the back of his head that they thought might be a gunshot wound.
They were kind of taken aback by this because Frankie didn't mention in the 911 call that he had been shot.
Initially, it's just a medical call. Then it becomes, we've got to lock this scene down. Now we've got a big investigation on our hands. Crime scene tape goes up, we isolate witnesses, and then we bring investigators in. He had a small caliber wound to the lower back portion of his neck, and the same thing to the back of his head.
It was evident that his injury was not self-inflicted. No gun was visible close by.
The police contacted my dad, and Dad let me know that Uncle Dallas had been killed. Uncle Dallas was a friendly guy, do anything for anybody that he could. It's one of those situations that you wonder how that could happen.
Dallas Leon Kellis was born in rural North Carolina near the end of the Great Depression.
My Uncle Dallas was raised by my grandmother. My grandfather was killed in an automobile accident, and I think it was 1940. So times are tough, and Uncle Dallas was the baby. He was the youngest of 7, and they definitely learned at an early age what work was about. He graduated from a high school in West End, North Carolina, and after that it was the United States Army.
After serving in the military, Dallas returned to Aberdeen and took a job as a machinist at a local textile mill.
In 1968, he married the love of his life, Louise Cole.
My Aunt Louise, she was a little older than my Uncle Dallas and had a couple of daughters from a previous marriage. Uncle Dallas, he was, almost say a dapper Dan, a sharp-dressed man, always everything altered, whole 9 yards, and they were happy together. They did well for themselves and built a nice house outside of Aberdeen. Church was the big thing. They enjoyed going to church and enjoyed doing things with the church. So that was their primary focus. Uncle Dallas, he enjoyed working out in the yard. They were good people and worked hard.
Dallas and Louise enjoyed 41 years together until she passed away in June 2009.
Pretty much age, and life just kind of caught up with her.
Dallas was heartbroken, but after a year of mourning, he opened up to the possibility of finding love again.
It gave the church ladies hope because he was considered to be a little bit of a catch. He had that little Burt Reynolds laugh that you'd get out of him every once in a while, but he had a laugh that was infectious. He was always one that was approachable and one that was there for you, and you knew that he was.
In 2010, someone captured his heart, but it wasn't one of the ladies from church. It was a woman from his past who was also recently widowed after the passing of her third husband.
Much to everyone's surprise, Dallas reconnects with an ex-girlfriend from his 20s named Margaret Francis Bright, better known to her loved ones as Frankie.
My grandmother grew up in a little town called Elizabethtown, North Carolina. She is the youngest of all of her siblings, the baby out of, I believe, at least 6. I didn't get to meet my great-grandparents, but I was told that they coddled her and she always got her way. My grandmother met Dallas in her 20s or before then. And so they had, a past relationship from what I was told. And after my granddaddy Jr. passed away and she moved back to North Carolina, my grandmother and Dallas rekindled their relationship in their 70s.
Although 50 years had passed, Dallas and Frankie quickly fell back in love. They were married the following year in February 2011.
They didn't date very long before they got married because it's like you're older. It's like, why wait? You never know when, it's going to be your last day. My grandmother and Dallas, they spent their time working out in the yard, watching TV like Wheel of Fortune. The old shows like Matlock, it's the normal things that older couples do together.
The reunited couple were enjoying their golden years together. But now, a bullet has shattered their second chance at love.
We're trying to establish a motive. Why would someone want to kill Dallas? It is important to rule out the spouse. That way we can focus our efforts on different people or suspects.
When investigators sit down with Frankie to find out what happened, she is understandably distraught.
I might appear to be strong, but inside right now I'm dying. I've always had to hold up for everybody else. I lost a son the 29th of November. I raised him. He was my grandson. I lost a daughter last year.
We've had some rough time. I'm sorry.
Frankie says she and Dallas were supposed to attend the funeral of a family member that day, so she woke up around 5 a.m. to get ready.
I came in here. I turned that coffee pot on so I could fix me a cup of coffee. And I walked back there and told him, I said, I'm going to fix some breakfast. He said, no, don't do that. He said, go get us McDonald's and get us a ham sandwich.
She said she went to McDonald's, got a ham biscuit, she went by the post office and came back home.
I called him and he didn't come. So So I walked out there and got the paper, and I come back, he still wasn't here. I thought, well, he's taking an awful long time in the bathroom. So I walked down there and I saw all that blood, and that's when I called.
Frankie tells investigators that she thinks someone might have broken into the house while she was out because Dallas's wallet and his watch are both missing from the nightstand.
With her saying that his watch and wallet were missing, then we felt that robbery could have been a motive, but we didn't see any signs of a struggle.
If individuals had come into the house and were looking to steal items of value, they would have been tearing up the house looking for it.
If someone breaks into a house, we see what's missing, the door kicked in, but the house was immaculate, very clean, organized. We didn't see anything else missing. That was stuck out. That was odd. Immediately, there's something suspicious here.
Coming up, a closer examination of the body offers new theories.
Looking at the gunshot to the back of the neck, it was a pretty close range shot.
And a family grudge points investigators toward a suspect.
Dallas's family was very vocal about Dallas not caring for her grandson.
Detectives in North Carolina are interviewing the widow of Dallas Kellis, who just found the victims shot dead in their home.
She did tell us about a suspicious person that she saw as she was leaving the residence to go get breakfast.
There was a guy walking that way. I do remember seeing him when I came back. He looked kind of like that man that comes by here once in a while and gets some money from my husband. Sure. My husband's a good-hearted man. He don't like to give money to nobody. But he said he'd probably go and buy booze with her or something.
Unfortunately, Frankie is unable to recall any details. And other than the missing belongings, there is little evidence of a break-in.
There was no signs of forced entry. There was nothing that appeared to be missing. Everything looked in order.
Do you leave the doors unlocked when you leave?
We don't have the lockings when we go to bed.
Okay. What kind of weapons are in the house?
There's we got a shotgun there. I don't even know what kind of rifle.
There was a .22 rifle. It was pretty clear by looking at the gun that it had been there for a while and had not been recently shot.
The size of the wound, wasn't large to what a shotgun would leave, so the shotgun was not the murder weapon either.
I was looking at the gunshot to the back of the neck. It did go through the shirt, and I could see what looked like powder burns. That kind of gave me the indication that it was a pretty close range shot. The body was removed from the house and taken to Raleigh for an autopsy.
Investigators hope the medical examiner will be able to confirm the caliber of the gun used to kill Dallas.
Without a murder weapon, it was beginning to look like whoever shot Dallas had taken the gun with him. At the same time, with no other suspects, it was important for investigators to corroborate the alibi that Frankie had given.
Officers wanted to verify that she did in fact go to McDonald's. So they go and they check, they get a video, and they get her on the video.
We decided to do a gunshot residue test on Frankie just to see if it would indicate that she had shot any weapons.
When they were talking with her, she had like a washcloth that she kind of kept wiping her hands with.
That made the gunshot residue test that we performed on Frankie inconclusive.
Though Frankie isn't completely cleared, for now, her alibi appears to check out.
With Frankie's whereabouts accounted for, detectives began pursuing the only other lead they have. They began canvassing the neighborhood, trying to see if anyone else saw the man that Frankie described.
We always have to start with the people surrounding them. Who do they know? Who would have a motive, opportunity? We look at those things.
We spoke to the neighbors next to them, behind them, no one had seen this person that she was talking about.
Just walking down the road near their house, there is a convenience store up there that people walk to on occasion.
We were allowed to look at their surveillance system, and we looked at, I would say, several hours before and several hours after. We didn't see a person walking down the street.
Frankie's next-door neighbor says he did see someone in the driveway with Dallas a few weeks ago.
The neighbor provided us with information that someone arrived at Dallas's residence in a silver Mustang, and he recalls both of them, Dallas and this person, looking at a silver gun. We learned that it was a revolver.
Afterwards, Dallas is seen shooting the pistol around his property. It almost seemed as if this guy showed up and sold Dallas a pistol.
We didn't locate a handgun inside the house. So from then, I believed that was going to be the murder weapon.
Frankie had claimed that the couple didn't own a handgun. So naturally, the question became, why did she lie? And what other things she might be lying about.
According to his loved ones, Dallas wasn't the kind of man who made enemies. But there was bad blood between him and Frankie's grandson, Uriah.
My grandmother raised Uriah. He lived with her a lot up until she got married and, moved in with Dallas. And I know that his relationship was probably also had a wedge between Dallas and her.
After we learned about Uriah, we spoke to Dallas's family, and they were very well aware of who Uriah was. Dallas's family was very vocal about Dallas not caring for Uriah. He wasn't a good person. He has some bad habits that Dallas did not care for. Uriah was not allowed to be at his residence.
It did appear that Uriah was being kicked out of the house he was living at with his uncle. But we wondered if maybe that Frankie was trying to move him into the house with him. And we speculated, was there an argument that ensued over that?
And we learned that he actually flew in the day of Dallas's murder.
And the first thing we thought is, could he have showed up and done this homicide while she was at McDonald's?
Investigators contact the airlines and discover Uriah's flight arrived earlier that morning.
One thing we had to consider is, did he have time to come down and do this homicide?
We checked, and he was actually still en route to North Carolina when the murder occurred. So with that, it ruled him out as a suspect.
But as detectives continue their interviews, a new lead takes the case in a different direction.
2 days after Dallas's death, one of our officers gets a call from a distant relative to Frankie.
According to her relative, Frankie is hiding things from investigators.
He tells us that Frankie's known to carry a revolver with her everywhere she goes. And then in his opinion, he didn't feel like that she would be afraid to use it.
At this point, we're thinking she's not this little lady that people think she may be. That's just an image that she puts on.
"48 hours into the investigation of Dallas Kellis's murder, a witness sheds new light on the grieving widow. A seemingly kind grandmother no one would look at twice for murder.
At this point, Frankie had already lied to investigators about the revolver and the handgun. So investigators began to wonder what else she might be lying about.
When detectives question more of Frankie's family, including 2 of her granddaughters, they learn the gun isn't the only thing she's been hiding.
Several of Frankie's family members didn't seem surprised by this information. They knew that she was known to carry a firearm with her.
It's a major red flag for detectives that Frankie would hide the fact that she carries a handgun.
Now investigators have to figure out, is there a possibility that she's the one who killed her husband? So investigators began to look more deeply into her background.
Frankie's granddaughters tell police she's been married 4 times and left a trail of broken homes behind her.
She didn't really raise any of her kids. She just kind of like left. She got remarried and the same thing, just kind of abandoned her children, to say the least. You know, maybe not mother of the year.
She wasn't close with her 5 children, but by the time her grandchildren were born, Frankie seemed determined to redeem herself.
My grandmother would be the one that you would call if you needed somebody to be there for you. She would do anything for her grandkids and the people that she loved.
But according to one of her granddaughters, that included teaching them how to shoplift.
My grandmother's not the typical grandmother, right? That you think of little old lady who bakes pies, comes over for birthdays.
She would have them commit crimes as kids. She would have them go into stores and steal items. And when they were caught, pretend like she had no idea that they were stealing. She appeared to be a sweet, nice lady, you know, like what a grandmother would look like. But she was not what she portrayed to be.
Based on this information from her granddaughters, investigators run a background check, which reveals Frankie's crimes included more than just petty theft.
Frankie went by different aliases. She had different social security numbers, different social security cards. One of Frankie's family members said that Frankie would sell her prescription medication to people. She had charges for prescription fraud, regular fraud, and shoplifting.
When we get to digging into Frankie's background, we find out she's been to federal prison for drug charges.
Her family told us she was actually released in 2010, and that was when she met Dallas.
According to Frankie's granddaughter, after 7 years in prison and marrying Dallas, things changed.
As a family, we were told that he didn't like us. And that was kind of hard, and that kind of puts a wedge in between me and my grandmother. I wouldn't put it past her to keep us away from him, because maybe she didn't want any of us to tell her secrets.
Detectives pay Frankie another visit to confront her with their findings, only to discover she's gone missing.
We executed an additional search warrant at the residence again.
Investigators are unable to locate the handguns during their search, but they do make another discovery.
We found clothes laying on the floor in front of the closet. The clothes were a blouse, some shorts. There was a spot that could possibly be blood. We also collected the clothes that she was wearing back when we arrived at the house.
And in her dresser, they find something even more incriminating.
We actually locate his wallet and his watch.
When investigators found the watch and wallet that Frankie claimed had been stolen, that immediately cast doubt over the whole robbery theory.
It was apparent that it was being concealed or hid from us. When we look in the wallet, all his cards are there, his driver's license is there, and we knew she was lying. Frankie definitely was a suspect.
Detectives in North Carolina have just uncovered evidence indicating Frankie Kellis may be involved in the murder of her husband, Dallas. When looking closer at the couple's financial records, they provide a potential motive.
Dallas was retired. I know he worked all his life, and he worked for that retirement. He was very, in a way, financially stable. His checkbooks were balanced, payments were on time, and then we started seeing discrepancies.
We found bills that looked like they were being paid where the envelope had the statement and the amount of the check, but the check was missing. We also found some checks that had recently been returned as insufficient funds.
There were several checks made out to Frankie, and the signature on it said Dallas, but it was quite apparently not Dallas's signature based on his signature cards from the bank.
We started seeing insufficient funds in the accounts. She was spending thousands and thousands of dollars, which alarmed us.
The evidence we found in the house gave us the impression that Mr. Kellis was being bled dry. It was about $39,000 of debt that had been accrued since Frankie came into the picture.
Records indicate Dallas wasn't the only person Frankie was defrauding.
They found some checks that had been written by LaRue Green to Mrs. Kellis. LaRue Green is the older sister of Dallas Kellis. But there was one check that did not appear to have the same signature on it.
We did go by, interview Dallas's sister, and she said that she was unaware that the checks were missing, and the checks that were cashed and forged, she had no knowledge about.
Dallas's sister says she has no idea where Frankie might have gone. The last time they spoke was the morning Dallas was killed.
She informed us that she received a call that morning from Frankie telling her that Dallas had passed away. What we found odd with that phone call was that she had called LaRue Green at 7:06 a.m., but she did not make the 911 call until 7:21. That's a big red flag that you're going to call 911 15 minutes later.
So how do you go from he's dead to I think he's dead? And then she claims to have done CPR.
The medical dispatcher asked her to perform CPR on the victim, and you could audibly hear her indicate that she checked the pulse.
Okay, pump the chest hard and fast, at least twice per second and 2 inches deep.
Okay, 1, 2, 3.
Looking at the body, it appeared that he hadn't been moved, which told us that CPR was not attempted. I mean, you are a sweet, innocent, helpless lady. Your husband just was murdered. Why lie? But when you're telling me initially that I tried to do CPR, you tell his sister, he is dead. Why lie to us?
When lab results come in, Frankie's clothing collected at the crime scene offers the strongest evidence against her.
The clothing that we were able to send off, it in fact did have gunshot residue on it.
Now, as the manhunt for Frankie continues, police get a tip that suggests this grandmother is on the move and her crime spree isn't over just yet.
I received a phone call from a family member of Frankie's in Georgia. She believed that Frankie and Uriah were going to kill them.
Frankie and Uriah showed up at the house in Georgia, unannounced.
It's not like they speak or have a relationship, so it was odd for them to even show up. They're being really weird. And one point, Frankie tells Uriah, hey, grab the candy.
He reaches in and grabs something which she felt like was a gun and put it in his waist. At that time, she went ahead and locked the doors and called for the sheriff's office to come out there because she felt frightened.
By the time police arrive at the residence, over 300 miles away from Aberdeen, Frankie and Uriah are gone. Investigators quickly move to obtain an arrest warrant.
After I got indictments for the murder, we had witnesses, family members come forward and provide us information that Frankie was actually back in Aberdeen at her residence. We did a drive-by to verify that she was there, and we actually saw Uriah in the driveway.
But with no sign of Frankie, detectives sit back and wait.
As we set up on the house, we actually see Frankie drive around towards the rear of the house and into the woods and took a side road in a way to, in my opinion, to evade from being seen. And when she hit the main road, we initiated a traffic stop. As soon as I pulled her over and I walked up to the car, sweet lady, she's just clueless to why we're there. No idea. And then we tell her she's under arrest. She wasn't upset, really even asked why. Just puts on this persona that she's a sweet old lady.
Coming up, Frankie offers an explanation for her odd behavior.
I'm in early stages of dementia.
And an alarming pattern is brought to light.
He believed that she was involved with the deaths of her previous husbands.
After 2.5 months of investigation, North Carolina police have arrested Frankie Kellis for the murder of her husband, Dallas.
When Frankie Kellis was arrested, her grandson Uriah was at the house. So they brought Frankie to the sheriff's office to talk to her, and they also had Uriah come up to the sheriff's office.
Although Uriah is not charged with any crime, he agrees to provide a statement. Frankie is much less cooperative.
We placed them in separate interview rooms, and I would say the hardest interview I've ever done occurred. She was tough. I would corner her into, hey, I know you're lying and this is why. She would try to control the interview.
I want you to tell me why I'm here.
I got an indictment for you. The charges are murder and forgery of instrument and uttering forged instrument. So that's why you're here.
Forge? And who did I kill?
I know you have a lot of questions, just like I do.
You can ask me after a while what we talked about, and I can't tell you, but go ahead.
Okay.
I'm in early stages of dementia.
What do you think about what you're charged with?
I think it's wrong.
Why?
Because I'm not guilty. I haven't killed my husband.
She claims she only left town because of her grief over her husband's death.
I can't stay there long at a time. I get so upset, miss him so bad.
Okay.
He was good to me.
But when police confront her with the holes in her story, Frankie's demeanor suddenly changes.
That's not true. That's not true. That's not true. That's a lie. I'm not even going to discuss that with you because it's not true.
She was the sweetest, nicest lady, and then in a matter of a second, she would be the devil himself. Anytime that we would present evidence to her that would show that she was lying, she would completely change.
Herein lies the problem too, because 15 minutes after you call a RU and you call 911.
I'm not going to discuss that because I don't know the time.
Okay. Look,
I'm not going to talk to you.
Listen to me. Calm down. I ain't even answered your question yet.
You're sitting over there trying to contradict everything I said.
When detectives question Uriah, he seems reluctant to cross his grandmother.
Uriah was interesting in a way where he was afraid of Frankie, but he was loyal to her. He would just make comments like, you guys don't know who Frankie is. the things that she's done.
According to Uriah, Dallas isn't the first of Frankie's 4 husbands to meet an untimely end.
She had been married 4 times, and he only knows of one that died of natural causes. He believed that she was involved with the deaths of her previous husbands. He volunteered information about Frankie allegedly overdosing one of her husbands on purpose.
According to Uriah, the victim was Frankie's second husband, Howard. And the two were still newlyweds at the time.
Allegedly, she goes on a honeymoon and, comes back and the family's looking for their father and she has him in an urn.
She had cremated immediately.
Though the accusations of foul play were well known among both families, the incident was never investigated, and Frankie vehemently denied having a hand in Howard's death. Still, Uriah's statement strengthens the case against Frankie.
She would have been presented well in front of a jury as far as getting rolled out in a wheelchair and having that sweet old lady look. But I do believe that I obtained a sufficient amount of evidence to show that that's not who she is.
But prosecutors worry it might not be enough for a jury to convict a harmless-looking octogenarian.
We don't have the forensic evidence that points, this is who did it. It's a circumstantial case where you just keep building on each piece of evidence.
Frankie had lied to investigators about the revolver and the handgun.
She said she was giving him CPR, but that was not true. Wallet, she says it was stolen, and they find a wallet in her room. So it's not, one big link, but several small links together.
But there really isn't like a smoking gun.
In October 2016, almost 3 months after Dallas Kellis was shot, his wife Frankie is charged with the murder.
She was also charged with felony forgery of an instrument for the check belonging to Dallas Kellis' sister, LaRue Green.
Based off the evidence, I believe that Frankie was spending Dallas's money without him knowing at first. Dallas found out and confronted Frankie before his murder.
Dallas kept a financial journal, and it was very meticulous. There were several cash advance checks that she had signed against Dallas's finances in the month or 2 leading up to his death.
Frankie knew she had bled Dallas out as much as money as she could get, and that he was about to cut her off.
I believe that she took the firearm that the neighbor reported seeing and shot Dallas while he was asleep. To come up with a story to tell law enforcement, she did go to McDonald's. She got food for one. She came back home, called Dallas's sister, told her in a way what happened to, I think, cover her tracks, and then decided to call 911.
Unfortunately, the case against Frankie is largely circumstantial.
In today's society, you have the CSI effect where people want to see smoking guns, they want to see the ballistics, they want to see DNA evidence and fingerprints. And in this case, we didn't really have it. There were no shell casings. Pretty much we just had Mr. Kellis laying there.
We located a small caliber rifle in the house, but it didn't turn out to be what he was shot with. It was more of a culmination of the evidence that just kept stacking up over time. She claims she does CPR on him. There's no evidence that CPR was performed on him. She says, well, his wallet and his watch are missing, and then we find that hidden in her dresser drawer.
Even the gunshot residue found on Frankie's clothes is of limited value as evidence.
defense attorney would say, well, couldn't it have been that she got gunshot residue on her clothing because she leaned against her husband trying to give him CPR? And so when we were making decisions about what to do with the case, those are things that we think about.
As her trial date approaches, every court hearing gives prosecutors more cause for concern.
In the courtroom, Frankie didn't really look like the type of person who was capable of killing their husband. She was frail, she was in a wheelchair, she just looked like somebody's grandma.
The jury, if we went to trial, they would see her in the wheelchair. They would see this, by now 83-year-old woman charged with murder. They're going to have sympathy for her.
Ultimately, prosecutors decide not to risk putting Frankie in front of a jury. Instead, they offer her a plea deal in June 2019.
Frankie Kellis pled guilty to voluntary manslaughter. She received a sentence of 84 months minimum, 113 months maximum. She got credit for that time she spent in the Moore County Jail. So from the October 4th of 2016 until October 2nd of 2023, she served, if my math is correct, 7 years.
It really blows my mind that she was able to put on this sweet old lady persona, at least at appearances. And, you know, when you dig into all the facts and all the details, you start to see just a monster.
I was told that if she can be incarcerated in the past and get through it, that she could get through it this time. And she did. She made it out. I have contact with her, you know. I talk to her. I know that some of my family doesn't have any contact with her whatsoever.
I wish there would have been something that we could have done to make a difference in that. I thank the world of Uncle Dallas, and nobody deserves to have done what he had done to him.
In the quiet landscapes of North Carolina, where life often moves at a gentle pace and neighbors share deep bonds of trust, the golden years of retirement are typically seen as a hard-earned sanctuary. It is a time for tending to gardens, attending community gatherings, and enjoying the peaceful fruits of a lifetime of labor. Yet, underneath this veneer of serene predictability, human nature can sometimes harbor dark motives that disrupt the peace of an entire community. The tragic demise of Dallas Leon Kellis, a beloved resident of Aberdeen, serves as a poignant reminder that danger does not always wear an obvious mask. Sometimes, the most threatening presence in a person's life is the one they have invited into their home, hidden behind a carefully constructed persona of vulnerability and age. Understanding how such a tragedy could unfold requires a careful examination of the psychology of manipulation, the meticulous nature of police work, and the structural vulnerabilities that leave older adults exposed to exploitation. To truly understand this case, one must first look at the life of the victim, a man who represented the very best of his generation. Dallas Leon Kellis was born in rural North Carolina during the Say-Hat, Alolo-E, Nogo-I, Nogo years of the late 1930s, specifically near the end of the Great Depression. Raised primarily by his mother, after his father passed away in an automobile accident. In the year 1940, Dallas learned the value of resilience, hard work, and family solidarity from a very young age. He was the youngest of 7 children, and his early years were marked by the necessity of helping his family get by during exceptionally lean times. After graduating from high school in West End, North Carolina, he chose to serve his country in the United States Army, a period that further instilled in him a sense of duty and discipline. Upon returning to civilian life, Dallas settled in the Aberdeen area, finding stable employment as a machinist at a local textile mill. He was known as a man of neat appearance, polite demeanor, and quiet dignity. In the year 1968, he married Louise Cole, and together they spent 41 years building a comfortable life, centered around their local church, their home, and their community. When Louise passed away in the year 2009, Dallas experienced the profound grief of losing a lifetime partner. However, after a period of mourning, his naturally warm and social disposition led him to seek companionship once again. As a respected elder of his church with a memorable, infectious laugh, he was highly regarded by those around him. It was during this period of vulnerability and hope that he crossed paths with a figure from his distant past. In the year 2010, Dallas reconnected with Margaret Francis Bright, known to her acquaintances as Frankie. She was an ex-girlfriend from his youth who had also recently been widowed. To Dallas, she represented a comforting link to his younger days, a familiar soul with whom he could share his remaining years. The two were married in February of the year 2011, embarking on what many believed would be a peaceful, happy chapter of their lives. However, the reality of this union was far different from the idyllic retirement Dallas envisioned. Underneath her exterior, as a quiet, elderly grandmother, Frankie carried a complex, highly deceptive history that was completely hidden from her new husband. For decades, she had operated under multiple aliases and utilized different social security numbers, moving through a series of marriages and leaving a trail of fractured family relationships in her wake. Her past was marked by criminal convictions, including federal prison time for drug-related offenses, prescription fraud, and regular fraud. Rather than being the sweet domestic companion she pretended to be, she was a highly calculated individual who saw Dallas not as a partner, but as a financial resource to be exploited. The devastating culmination of this exploitation occurred on July 20th, the year 2016. At approximately 7:20 in the morning, the Emergency Communications Center in Moore County received a call from Frankie Kellis, who claimed to have discovered her husband deceased in their bedroom. When the first responders arrived at the home in Aberdeen, they found Dallas lying in his bed. While the initial dispatch had been for a medical emergency, the physical evidence quickly told a different story. Emergency medical services personnel noticed an injury to the back of the neck and head that was inconsistent with natural causes, leading them to suspect a gunshot wound. The police department immediately secured the scene, initiating a homicide investigation. As investigators began to probe the circumstances surrounding the death, they were faced with a narrative presented by Frankie that seemed designed to direct attention away from the household. She claimed that she had risen early that morning, around 5 in the morning, to prepare for a family funeral. She stated that Dallas had requested a breakfast sandwich from a local fast food restaurant, prompting her to leave the house to run errands, which included visiting the post office. Upon her return, she claimed to have found her husband unresponsive. To support the theory of an outside intruder, Frankie pointed out that Dallas' wallet and watch were missing from their usual spot on the nightstand, suggesting that a robbery had occurred while she was away. She also mentioned having seen a suspicious, unidentified man lingering in the neighborhood, a classic diversionary tactic often employed by individuals seeking to cast suspicion onto a phantom perpetrator. Despite her attempts to paint a picture of a random crime of opportunity, the seasoned investigators of the police department began to notice significant discrepancies in her story. First, the physical state of the home did not align with a typical robbery. There were no signs of forced entry, and the residence was exceptionally clean and orderly. A standard home invasion or burglary typically involves a chaotic search for valuables, yet nothing else in the house had been disturbed. This immediate lack of physical corroboration raised the internal alarms of the detectives. The police then focused on verifying Frankie S.'s timeline, while surveillance footage from the local restaurant did confirm that she had purchased food during the morning hours. A critical anomaly emerged regarding her communication. Detectives discovered that Frankie had placed a phone call to Dallas's sister at 7:06 in the morning, explicitly informing her that Dallas had passed away. Yet, she did not place the call to the emergency services until 7:21 in the morning, a gap of 15 minutes. This delay was highly suspicious. In an actual medical emergency, the instinctive human reaction is to contact life-saving services immediately, rather than calling extended family members first and waiting a quarter of an hour to summon professional help. Furthermore, during the emergency call, the dispatcher had instructed Frankie to perform cardiopulmonary resuscitation. She claimed to have complied, but the physical state of Dallas' body and the lack of any physical disturbance to the bedding strongly suggested that no such life-saving measures had been attempted. The search for the physical evidence intensified. The medical examiner confirmed that Dallas had been shot at very close range with a small caliber firearm, as evidenced by the presence of gunpowder residue around the wound. While a search of the house initially revealed a .22 caliber rifle, it was clear that this weapon had not been fired recently and was not the murder weapon. The detectives then turned to the surrounding community for clues. A neighbor provided a vital piece of information, recalling that a few weeks prior to the incident, he had observed an individual in a silver car selling a small handgun, specifically a revolver, to Dallas. The neighbor had even witnessed Dallas testing the weapon on his property. When asked about this, Frankie had insisted that there were no handguns in the residence, a direct lie that further heightened the focus of the investigation on her. The breakthrough in the case came when investigators executed a secondary, highly thorough search warrant of the home. In Frankie's dresser drawer, tucked away from plain sight, the detectives discovered Dallas' missing watch and wallet, with all of his identification and cards intact. This discovery completely dismantled the robbery theory. There was no outside intruder, and there was no random thief. The items had been deliberately concealed within the home by the very person who had reported them stolen. In addition to this, forensic examination of the clothing Frankie had been wearing on the morning of the crime revealed the presence of gunshot residue, linking her directly to the discharge of a firearm. With the physical evidence mounting, the investigators also began to uncover the financial motive behind the crime. A detailed analysis of the household finances revealed that Dallas's retirement savings and bank accounts had been systematically depleted. Frankie had accumulated approximately $39,000 in debt through unauthorized spending and cash advances. She had also forged checks from both Dallas' account and the account of his elderly sister. Dallas, who was known to keep a highly meticulous financial journal, had recently discovered these discrepancies. It became clear to investigators that he had confronted Frankie about the missing funds and was on the verge of cutting off her financial access. Facing the exposure of her extensive fraud and the end of her comfortable lifestyle, Frankie chose a violent resolution to silence her husband. As the police prepared to file charges, Frankie abruptly went missing from the area, traveling to Georgia with her grandson. While there, her behavior became increasingly erratic, leading relatives to fear for their safety and contact the local authorities. The Moore County investigators acted swiftly, obtaining indictments and coordinating with regional law enforcement. When Frankie eventually returned to the Aberdeen area, she was arrested during a calculated traffic stop. Even in custody, she attempted to maintain her facade of a frail, innocent, elderly woman, reacting with sudden anger and cold detachment whenever her fabrications were directly challenged. The legal resolution of the case highlighted the complexities of prosecuting elderly defendants. Although the circumstantial evidence was incredibly strong, prosecutors had to weigh the challenges of presenting an 83-year-old woman in a wheelchair to a jury. The fear that a jury might feel undue sympathy for her physical frailty, despite her cold-blooded actions, led the prosecution to offer a plea agreement. In June of the year 2019, Frankie Kellis pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter. She received a sentence of 84 months minimum to 113 months maximum, ultimately serving approximately 7 years before her release in October of the year 2023. This tragic case offers profound lessons for families and communities regarding the prevention of elder exploitation and the identification of domestic manipulation. One of the most critical safeguards is the maintenance of active, open communication within families, particularly when an elderly relative enters a new relationship later in life. While it is natural to want to respect an individual's autonomy and their desire for companionship, families must remain vigilant about sudden changes in financial habits, estate planning, or the isolation of their loved ones from long-term friends and relatives. Meticulous record-keeping, such as the financial journal kept by Dallas, can be an invaluable tool, but it must be paired with external oversight, such as joint accounts with trusted family members or regular independent financial reviews to prevent unilateral exploitation. For law enforcement, the rapid resolution of sensitive cases relies heavily on the swift preservation of digital and physical timelines. In the modern era, the integration of immediate financial forensics, rapid analysis of communication metadata, and the thorough verification of alibis through local surveillance networks can drastically shorten the time needed to identify a suspect. By recognizing the psychological indicators of deception, such as the minimization of physical evidence or the creation of elaborate distraction narratives, investigators can quickly narrow their focus. This case demonstrates that justice is achieved not through a single dramatic discovery, but through the patient, disciplined assembly of many small truths, ensuring that even the most sophisticated fabrications are eventually brought to light. The complexities of human relationships often mask the most profound dangers, especially when trust is built over decades and cemented by the shared experiences of youth. In the study of domestic crimes, one of the most troubling phenomena is the exploitation of the elderly by those they hold dearest. These cases, while tragic, occur with a disturbing frequency that warrants deep analytical scrutiny. To understand why such crimes take place, one must examine the intersection of financial vulnerability, psychological manipulation, and the social isolation that often accompanies old age. Perpetrators of these offenses frequently operate under the assumption that the advanced age of their victims will serve as a natural cover, attributing physical decline or sudden absence to natural causes. The primary motive in these instances is almost always material gain, driven by an insatiable desire for resources that the perpetrator did not earn. When an older individual has spent a lifetime working diligently, accumulating a stable retirement fund, and establishing a comfortable home, they become an attractive target for opportunists. These opportunists are often individuals from their past or family members who recognize that the victim possesses assets but lacks the youthful vigor to defend them. The frequency of these cases in modern society is also linked to the ease with which a manipulator can isolate their target. By slowly severing the connections between the victim and their supportive family members, the perpetrator creates an environment where their actions go unchecked, allowing financial exploitation to escalate into physical harm when the threat of exposure becomes imminent. In tracking down the perpetrators of such deeply personal crimes, law enforcement must rely on a combination of physical evidence, behavioral analysis, and meticulous financial forensic work. When a crime scene is staged to look like a random burglary or a tragic medical event, investigators must look past the obvious and focus on the structural anomalies of the environment. One of the most critical clues is the absence of forced entry. A genuine home invasion typically leaves a trail of chaotic destruction, with doors forced open, windows shattered, and rooms ransacked in a frantic search for valuables. When a home remains immaculate and organized, with only highly specific personal items reported missing, it immediately signals to trained professionals that the perpetrator had authorized access or sought to fabricate a narrative. Furthermore, timeline inconsistencies represent a major vulnerability for even the most calculating criminals. The human mind, when attempting to construct a false alibi, often struggles to reconcile the precise timing of events. A delay in contacting emergency services, unusual movements captured on local surveillance systems, and discrepancies between what a witness claims to have done and what the physical evidence suggests are all vital threads that investigators pull to unravel a deception. The sophistication of these criminals is often overestimating by themselves, as they rely heavily on social biases, assuming that their age, gender, or outward presentation of vulnerability will shield them from suspicion. They play a role, presenting themselves as grieving companions or helpless bystanders, failing to realize that modern forensic science and behavioral profiling are designed to look beneath the surface. To prevent these heartbreaking occurrences, communities must draw profound life lessons regarding vigilance and the protection of older family members. The most effective defense against domestic exploitation is active engagement and open communication within families. It is vital to remain observant of sudden changes in an older relative life, such as the unexpected reemergence of individuals from their distant past, rapid decisions to marry after brief periods of courtship, or the sudden isolation of the individual from their traditional support networks. Financial transparency is another critical safeguard. Families should encourage the establishment of co-guardianships or professional oversight for financial accounts, ensuring that no single individual has unchecked control over an older person's assets. When suspicious transactions, forged signatures, or unexplained debts begin to surface, they must be addressed immediately rather than dismissed as simple misunderstandings. For law enforcement, the key to resolving these cases more rapidly lies in the immediate implementation of objective, bias-free investigative protocols. Investigators must treat every domestic death with the same rigorous standard of scrutiny, regardless of the age or apparent fragility of the surviving spouse. By conducting swift financial audits, verifying alibis through electronic and physical surveillance without delay, and performing comprehensive background checks on all close associates early in the process, police can bypass the deceptive facades constructed by master manipulators and secure justice for the victims. The story of Dallas Leon Kellis is a poignant testament to a life well lived, cut short by the very trust he placed in another. Born in rural North Carolina near the end of the Great Depression, Dallas was raised by his grandmother after his father was tragically killed in an automobile accident in the year 1940. Growing up as the youngest of 7 children during a challenging era, he learned the value of hard work, discipline, and perseverance at a very early age. After completing his education at a high school in West End, North Carolina, Dallas answered the call of duty and served his country in the United States Army. Upon returning to civilian life, he settled in the town of Aberdeen, securing a position as a dedicated machinist at a local textile mill. It was a career defined by precision, dedication, and reliability, qualities that Dallas carried into every aspect of his existence. In the year 1968, he married the love of his life, Louise Cole, a union that would bring him immense happiness and stability. Together, they built a beautiful home outside Aberdeen, attended church regularly, and became active, respected members of their local community. For 41 years, Dallas and Louise shared a deep, unwavering bond until her passing in June of the year 2009. The loss left Dallas heartbroken, but his resilient spirit and infectious laugh eventually allowed him to open his heart once more to the prospect of companionship. In the year 2010, Dallas crossed paths with a woman from his youth, Margaret Francis Bright, who was widely known to her family and friends as Frankie. Frankie had recently returned to North Carolina after the passing of her third husband, and the two quickly rekindled a romantic relationship that had begun decades earlier when they were in their 20s. To those who observed them, it seemed like a heartwarming second chance at love for 2 individuals in the autumn of their lives. They were married in February of the year 2011, embarking on what many believed would be a peaceful retirement, filled with gardening, watching television, and enjoying the quiet comforts of their home. However, beneath the surface of this seemingly idyllic union lay a web of deception, financial strain, and dark secrets that would ultimately culminate in tragedy. On the morning of July 20th, 2016, the quiet of the Aberdeen community was shattered when a frantic call was placed to the Moore County 911 emergency line at approximately 7:21 in the morning. The caller was 80-year-old Frankie, who, in a breathy and distraught voice, informed the dispatcher that she believed her husband was deceased in their bed. She explained that there was blood on the pillow and that she was unable to perform cardiopulmonary resuscitation due to her own limited mobility and advanced age. When emergency medical services and local police officers arrived at the immaculate residence, they discovered 78-year-old Dallas Leon Kellis lying motionless in the bed. While the initial dispatch had suggested a medical emergency, first responders immediately noticed a small caliber wound to the lower back portion of his neck and another to the back of his head. It was instantly clear that the injuries were not self-inflicted, and the complete absence of a firearm near the body transformed the scene into a homicide investigation. As crime scene tape was secured around the property, investigators began the delicate process of interviewing the newly widowed Frankie. She presented herself as a fragile, grieving woman, sharing stories of recent family losses and explaining her movements on that fateful morning. According to Frankie, she and Dallas had planned to attend a family funeral that day, prompting her to wake up around 5 in the morning to prepare. She claimed that Dallas had requested a ham biscuit from a local fast food restaurant for breakfast, prompting her to leave the house to run errands. She detailed a route that took her to the restaurant and then to the post office before she returned home, only to discover her husband unresponsive. To explain the potential motive for such a horrific act, Frankie pointed out that Dallas' signature watch and his wallet were missing from the nightstand, suggesting that an unknown intruder had entered the home during her brief absence and committed a robbery. She also mentioned having seen a suspicious individual lurking in the neighborhood recently, raising the possibility of a random, predatory crime. While the theory of a home invasion was initially considered, experienced investigators quickly began to notice details that did not align with a standard robbery. The home of Dallas Kellis was remarkably clean, organized, and entirely undisturbed. There were no signs of forced entry on any of the doors or windows, and no other valuables of significant worth had been disturbed or taken. In a genuine burglary, intruders almost always leave a path of disruption as they search for items to steal. Yet here, the orderliness of the household was absolute. This prompted detectives to systematically verify the alibi provided by Frankie. Officers obtained surveillance footage from the local fast food establishment, which confirmed her presence in the drive-thru during the morning hours, seemingly supporting her timeline. However, when investigators attempted to perform a routine gunshot residue test on her hands, they noted that she was constantly wiping her palms with a washcloth she kept in her possession. This action ultimately rendered the results of the initial test inconclusive, raising early concerns about potential efforts to alter physical evidence. Seeking to leave no stone unturned, the police conducted a thorough canvass of the neighborhood and reviewed hours of surveillance footage from a nearby convenience store. None of the neighbors had observed the mysterious individual Frankie described, and the video recordings showed no foot traffic matching her description on the road surrounding the home. However, a crucial lead emerged when a next-door neighbor reported seeing a visitor at the residence a few weeks prior. The neighbor recalled a man arriving in a silver sports car and displaying a handgun, which appeared to be a revolver, to Dallas. According to the witness, Dallas had subsequently tested the firearm on his property, suggesting that he had recently acquired a pistol. When investigators questioned Frankie about the presence of handguns in the home, she claimed that they did not own such weapons, stating that the only firearms in their possession were an older shotgun and a rifle stored in the house, neither of which had been fired recently. This contradiction between the witness statement and the widow claims intensified the focus on the internal dynamics of the household. As detectives dug deeper, they uncovered significant tension within the family unit, particularly concerning Frankie's grandson, Uriah. Dallas had reportedly held a strong disapproval of Uriah's lifestyle and behavior, leading to a strict rule that the young man was not permitted to stay at the residence. Investigators learned that Uriah had actually flown into North Carolina on the very day of the murder, raising immediate questions about his potential involvement. However, a detailed check of flight records and transit times confirmed that Uriah was still traveling and had not yet arrived in the area when the crime took place, effectively ruling him out as a physical suspect. Nevertheless, the friction surrounding his relationship with Dallas remained a vital piece of the psychological puzzle. 2 days after the passing of Dallas, a breakthrough occurred when an extended relative of Frankie contacted law enforcement with startling information. The caller revealed that Frankie was far from the harmless, simple grandmother she appeared to be, disclosing that she was known to carry a revolver with her constantly and was entirely capable of using it. Armed with this new perspective, investigators conducted a comprehensive background check on Margaret Frances Bright, uncovering an astonishing history of deception. The search revealed that she had operated under multiple aliases, utilized different social security numbers, and possessed a lengthy criminal record that included convictions for prescription fraud, regular fraud, shoplifting, and drug-related charges that had resulted in a federal prison sentence. Her family members described a woman who was highly manipulative, even going so far as to involve her grandchildren in shoplifting schemes during their youth, maintaining a sweet and innocent exterior to evade detection. With the realization that the primary suspect was a master of disguise, detectives executed a secondary, more exhaustive search warrant at the Aberdeen residence. Frankie herself was nowhere to be found, having apparently left the area. But the search yielded devastating evidence. Hidden deep within a drawer in Frankie's dresser, investigators located Dallas' missing wallet, complete with his identification and credit cards, as well as his watch. The discovery of these items, which Frankie had claimed were stolen by a mysterious intruder, shattered her credibility entirely. Additionally, investigators recovered clothing belonging to Frankie that appeared to have small spots of blood, as well as the garments she had worn on the morning of the crime, which were sent to a forensic laboratory for specialized testing. A detailed forensic audit of the couple financial records soon provided a clear and compelling motive for the crime. Dallas, who had always been a financially responsible and meticulous planner, keeping a detailed ledger of his expenditures, was systematically being defrauded. Investigators uncovered a mountain of debt, totaling approximately $39,000 that had been accrued since Frankie entered his life. Checks had been forged in his name, bank accounts were depleted to the point of insufficient funds, and bills were left unpaid. Furthermore, the audit revealed that Frankie had also forged checks belonging to Dallas' elderly sister, LaRue Green, without her knowledge. It became increasingly clear that Dallas was being financially ruined, and investigators surmised that he had recently discovered the deception, confronting Frankie and threatening to end her access to his hard-earned assets. The timeline of the morning of the crime also revealed a damning 15-minute discrepancy. Phone records indicated that Frankie had placed a call to Dallas' sister at 7:06 in the morning, calmly informing her that Dallas had passed away. Yet, she did not contact the 911 emergency line until 7:21 in the morning, at which point she claimed to the dispatcher that she had just discovered him and was unsure if he was dead. This deliberate delay, combined with the lack of any evidence that she had attempted cardiopulmonary resuscitation as she claimed, painted a chilling picture of calculation and staging. When the forensic laboratory results returned, they confirmed the presence of gunshot residue on the clothing Frankie had worn that morning, providing the physical link that connected her directly to the discharge of a firearm. As the search for Frankie intensified, law enforcement received a worried call from a relative in the state of Georgia. Frankie and her grandson, Uriah, had arrived. At Moth, their residence unannounced, and were acting in an unsettling manner, leading the family to believe their safety was threatened when Uriah was seen concealing an object resembling a firearm in his waistband. Although local authorities in Georgia responded quickly, the pair had already departed before they could be apprehended. Knowing that Frankie was on the run, North Carolina investigators secured indictments for murder and financial forgery. Shortly thereafter, tips indicated that Frankie had returned to the Aberdeen area. Officers monitoring the residence observed her attempting to evade detection by driving through a wooded path behind the property. A tactical traffic stop was initiated as soon as she reached the main road, resulting in her arrest. True to her deceptive nature, Frankie maintained her sweet old lady persona during the arrest, showing no surprise or distress when she was taken into custody. During subsequent interviews at the sheriff's office, investigators faced a formidable challenge. Frankie was highly cooperative yet fiercely evasive, attempting to control the narrative and vehemently denying any wrongdoing, claiming she had only left the area due to her profound grief. However, her demeanor would shift instantly from grandmotherly warmth to intense anger whenever she was confronted with the physical evidence of her lies. In a separate room, her grandson Uriah, while fiercely loyal and visibly fearful of his grandmother, provided investigators further insight into her dark past. He revealed that Dallas was not the first of Frankie's husbands to meet an untimely end, noting that of her 4 previous marriages, only one had ended due to verified natural causes. He shared family suspicions regarding the sudden death of her second husband, Howard, who had been cremated immediately after returning from their honeymoon, an incident that had never been officially investigated. Despite the mounting circumstantial evidence, prosecutors faced a difficult challenge. In the courtroom, Frankie, who was by then 83 years old, presented as an incredibly frail woman in a wheelchair, an image that would undoubtedly elicit deep sympathy from a jury. In today's legal landscape, where juries often expect direct physical evidence such as a recovered murder weapon or DNA, a case built entirely on circumstantial links, financial records, and timeline discrepancies carried a risk of acquittal. Balancing the desire for a guaranteed conviction with the practical challenges of a trial, the prosecution offered a plea agreement in June of the year 2019. Margaret Frankie Kellis pled guilty to voluntary manslaughter, receiving a sentence of 84 months minimum to 113 months maximum. With credit for the time she had already served in the Moore County Jail. Since her arrest in October of the year 2016, she completed her sentence and was released in October of the year 2023. While the resolution brought a measure of closure, it also left a lasting impact on those who loved Dallas, serving as a reminder of how easily a manipulative predator can exploit the trust of a decent, hardworking man. The memory of Dallas Leon Kellis remains cherished by his family and the community of Aberdeen, a symbol of a life of honor, service, and kindness that should never have been cut short by the hand of deception. The peaceful streets of Aberdeen, North Carolina, have long been known for their quiet charm and the close-knit bonds of their residents. In this serene setting, neighbors looked out for one another, and life moved at a gentle, predictable pace. This tranquility was shattered on the morning of July 20th, 2016, when a frantic call was placed to the Moore County Emergency Dispatch. The caller was an elderly woman named Frankie Kellis, who sounded breathless and deeply distressed. She reported to the dispatcher that her husband, Dallas Leon Kellis, was unresponsive in their home. On the recorded call, she expressed great panic, stating that she believed her husband had passed away and noting the presence of blood on his pillow. The dispatcher, attempting to provide immediate guidance, instructed her to perform cardiopulmonary resuscitation. However, Frankie explained that she was 80 years old and had limited physical mobility, which prevented her from executing the physical demands of the life-saving procedure. Within minutes, first responders and emergency medical services arrived at the residence, only to find that 78-year-old Dallas Kellis was already deceased. Initially, the situation was treated as a standard medical emergency call. However, as medical personnel began to examine Dallas to render whatever aid might still be possible, they noticed something unexpected. There was a significant amount of blood on the pillow, and a closer inspection revealed an injury to the lower back portion of his neck and another to the back of his head. These wounds were highly consistent with close-range gunshots. This discovery immediately transformed the nature of the call. First responders were taken aback, particularly because Frankie had made no mention of a firearm or a shooting during her call to the 911 dispatcher. Recognizing that they were now dealing with a potential homicide, the emergency personnel secured the scene and contacted law enforcement. Crime scene tape was quickly erected, witnesses were isolated, and detectives were brought in to initiate a comprehensive investigation. It was readily apparent to the responding officers that the injuries were not self-inflicted, especially since no firearm was found anywhere near the body. Dallas Leon Kellis was a beloved figure in his community, known for his friendly demeanor and his willingness to help anyone in need. Born in rural North Carolina near the end of the Great Depression, Dallas was the youngest of 7 children. His early years were marked by hardship, as his father had been killed in an automobile accident in 1940, leaving his grandmother to raise the family during challenging economic times. Through these early struggles, Dallas and his siblings learned the value of hard work. After graduating from high school in West End, North Carolina, Dallas served his country in the United States Army. Following his military service, he returned to the Aberdeen area and secured a position as a machinist at a local textile mill, a job he held with dedication for many years. In 1968, Dallas married the love of his life, Louise Cole, a woman slightly older than him who had children from a previous marriage. Together, they built a comfortable life and a beautiful home outside of Aberdeen. They were deeply active in their local church, which served as the cornerstone of their social and spiritual lives. Dallas was remembered as a sharp-dressed man with an infectious Burt Reynolds-style laugh, always approachable and warm. Dallas and Louise enjoyed 41 happy years together until her passing in June 2009. Heartbroken by the loss, Dallas spent a year in mourning before opening his heart to the possibility of companionship once more. Given his kind nature and stable life, he was considered quite a catch by the ladies in his church community. However, in 2010, Dallas reconnected with a woman from his distant past. Margaret Francis Bright, known to her family and friends as Frankie, had been an ex-girlfriend of his during their 20s. Frankie had also been recently widowed after the passing of her third husband. Despite the passage of 50 years, the spark between Dallas and Frankie was quickly rekindled. They were married in February 2011, choosing not to delay their happiness given their advanced years. To external observers, the reunited couple seemed to be enjoying their golden years, spending their time gardening, watching television programs, and living a quiet, retired life. This peaceful facade made the tragedy of July 20th, 2016, all the more shocking. As investigators began their work, their immediate priority was to establish a motive and to systematically rule out or implicate those closest to the victim, starting with the spouse. During her initial interviews with law enforcement, Frankie appeared understandably distraught, sharing details of recent personal losses, including the passing of her grandson and her daughter. She explained that on the morning of the tragedy, she and Dallas were preparing to attend a family funeral. According to Frankie, she woke up around 5 in the morning and turned on the coffee pot. When she went to wake Dallas and offered to prepare breakfast, he supposedly requested that she instead drive to a local McDonald's to pick up a ham biscuit for their meal. Frankie claimed she followed his request, drove to the restaurant, went by the local post office, and then returned home. Upon her return, she noticed that Dallas had not come out to meet her. After retrieving the morning newspaper and noticing his continued absence, she went to investigate and discovered him covered in blood on their bed, prompting her call to emergency services. To support the theory of an outside intruder, Frankie pointed out that Dallas' wallet and his wristwatch were missing from the nightstand where he usually kept them. This detail initially led investigators to consider robbery as a potential motive. However, experienced detectives quickly noticed several inconsistencies. A professional forensic analysis of the home revealed absolutely no signs of a struggle or forced entry. The house was immaculate, highly organized, and completely undisturbed. Typically, when an intruder enters a residence with the intent to commit a robbery, they search through drawers, closets, and cabinets, leaving a trail of disarray. In this case, nothing else in the home appeared to be missing or disturbed. Furthermore, a closer examination of the gunshot wounds on Dallas' neck indicated that the weapon had been discharged at very close range, as evidenced by the presence of powder burns on his shirt. This suggested an intimate, targeted act rather than a random home invasion. As part of their standard procedure to verify alibis, investigators obtained surveillance footage from the local McDonald's, which confirmed that Frankie had indeed visited the drive-thru on the morning of the crime. However, her physical behavior during her initial interaction with the police raised quiet suspicions. Detectives noticed that she repeatedly wiped her hands with a washcloth during their conversation. When forensic technicians attempted to perform a gunshot residue test on her hands, the results were ultimately inconclusive, an outcome that detectives suspected may have been influenced by her persistent hand wiping. Meanwhile, officers began canvassing the neighborhood, seeking any witnesses who might have seen a suspicious individual or vehicle in the area. Neighboring residents and local convenience store surveillance footage failed to corroborate Frankie's mention of a mysterious stranger lurking near the property. An unexpected breakthrough occurred when a next-door neighbor provided a crucial piece of information. The neighbor recalled seeing an individual in a silver Mustang visit the property a few weeks prior to the incident. According to this witness, Dallas and this visitor were observed examining a silver handgun, specifically a revolver, which Dallas was subsequently seen test firing on his property. This revelation contradicted Frankie's previous assertion to investigators that the only firearms in the household were an old shotgun and a .22 caliber rifle, neither of which showed signs of recent use. If Dallas had recently acquired a revolver, and it was now missing from the home, it became highly probable that this missing handgun was the actual weapon used in the crime. As investigators dug deeper, family dynamics began to paint a more complex picture. Detectives learned of significant tension between Dallas and Frankie S. Uriah. According to family members, Dallas did not approve of Uriah's lifestyle and habits and had made it clear that Uriah was not welcome in their home. This conflict had created a wedge within the household. Investigators initially wondered if Uriah could have traveled to the area and committed the act while Frankie was away at the restaurant. However, a detailed check of airline records revealed that although Uriah did fly into North Carolina on the day of the murder, his flight was still in transit at the exact time the crime occurred, effectively ruling him out as a direct suspect. The direction of the investigation shifted dramatically 48 hours after the homicide, when an officer received a telephone call from a distant relative of Frankie. The relative warned investigators that Frankie was not the helpless, sweet grandmother she portrayed herself to be. According to this informant, Frankie was known to habitually carry a revolver with her and was fully capable of using it if she felt threatened or cornered. This tip prompted detectives to look much more closely at Frankie's background, and what they uncovered was an astonishing history of deception. Interviews with Frankie's granddaughters and other family members painted a portrait of a master manipulator. Far from being a traditional, gentle matriarch, Frankie had spent decades living a double life. Her family revealed that she had been married 4 times and had a history of abandoning her children to pursue new relationships. Furthermore, her granddaughters disclosed that Frankie had engaged in illegal activities, even coaching her grandchildren in shoplifting techniques when they were young, using them to steal items while she feigned ignorance if they were caught. A comprehensive background check of criminal databases and government records revealed that Frankie had utilized multiple aliases, various social security numbers, and different identification cards throughout her life. Her criminal history included charges for prescription fraud, general fraud, shoplifting, and drug offenses. Most notably, she had served a significant sentence in a federal prison for drug charges, from which she was released in 2010, shortly before she reconnected with Dallas. Armed with this new understanding of Frankie's true character, investigators secured an additional search warrant for the Kellis residence. During this second, more exhaustive search, detectives focused on areas that might have been overlooked. In the bedroom, they made 2 critical discoveries. First, they found a set of clothing, consisting of a blouse and shorts, discarded on the floor near the closet, bearing spots that appeared to be blood. Second, and most damaging to Frankie's claims, investigators opened her dresser drawer and discovered Dallas's missing wallet and wristwatch hidden beneath her belongings. The wallet was completely intact, containing all of his identification cards and credit cards. This discovery shattered the robbery theory and provided undeniable proof that Frankie had actively concealed these items to mislead law enforcement. To establish a clear motive, forensic accountants and investigators conducted a thorough audit of the couple's financial records. While Dallas had spent his entire life working hard and maintaining a stable, organized financial profile with meticulously kept ledger books, his accounts began to show severe irregularities following his marriage to Frankie. The audit revealed that Frankie had accrued approximately $39,000 in debt. Investigators found numerous cash advance checks drawn against Dallas accounts, bearing signatures that did not match his established signature cards at the bank. Additionally, Frankie had targeted Dallas' elderly sister, LaRue Green, by forging her signature on checks without her knowledge. As the financial pieces came together, a compelling timeline emerged. It became clear that Dallas, who was highly meticulous about his finances, was on the verge of discovering the extensive debt and unauthorized transactions. Investigators hypothesized that Dallas had confronted Frankie about these discrepancies, or was about to do so, threatening to cut off her access to his hard-earned retirement funds. Facing the exposure of her secrets and the loss of her financial security, Frankie likely decided to eliminate her husband. Another significant piece of evidence lay in the timeline of the phone calls on the morning of the crime. Telephone records indicated that Frankie had placed a call to Dallas's sister, LaRue Green, at 7:06 in the morning, calmly informing her that Dallas had passed away. Yet, Frankie did not place her call to 911 until 15 minutes later at 7:21. This 15-minute delay was highly suspicious, as a distressed spouse discovering an unresponsive partner would logically contact emergency services immediately before calling other relatives. Furthermore, while Frankie claimed during the emergency call that she had attempted to perform cardiopulmonary resuscitation, physical evidence at the scene, and the condition of Dallas' body indicated that he had not been moved, suggesting no such life-saving measures had actually been attempted. To make matters more urgent, before charges could be officially filed, Frankie went missing. A multi-state search was initiated. Investigators received a concerning report from a family member in Georgia, who stated that Frankie and her grandson, Uriah, had arrived at their residence unannounced and were acting in an extremely bizarre and unsettling manner. The relative reported that during the visit, Frankie had made a subtle gesture to Uriah, instructing him to retrieve an item, which the relative believed was a handgun. Fearing for her safety, the relative locked herself in a room and contacted the local sheriff's office. However, by the time local authorities arrived, Frankie and Uriah had already departed. The breakthrough came when witnesses reported that Frankie had slipped back into the Aberdeen area and was hiding at her residence. Surveillance teams set up a perimeter around the house. They observed Frankie attempting to evade detection by driving her vehicle through a wooded, unpaved side road behind the property to access the main highway. As soon as her vehicle reached the main road, law enforcement officers initiated a high-risk traffic stop. When approached by the officers, Frankie immediately reverted to her sweet, bewildered elderly persona, acting completely unaware of why she was being stopped. She was placed under arrest without incident. During her interrogation at the sheriff's office, Frankie proved to be an exceptionally difficult subject. Experienced interrogators noted that she was highly manipulative, attempting to control the direction of the interview and vehemently denying any involvement in her husband's death. She claimed her sudden departure from the area was merely a coping mechanism to deal with her profound grief. However, whenever detectives presented her with the concrete physical evidence of her deception, such as the discovery of Dallas' wallet in her drawer or the timeline of her phone calls, her demeanor would instantaneously shift from a frail, sweet grandmother to a highly aggressive, confrontational individual. In a separate room, Uriah was interviewed by detectives. While he remained loyal to his grandmother, he expressed a palpable fear of her, hinting to investigators that they did not truly understand what she was capable of or the dark secrets she held. He even shared allegations regarding the suspicious death of Frankie S.'s second husband, who had been cremated immediately after his passing without a formal investigation, though those allegations were never legally proven. As the case prepared for trial, prosecutors faced a difficult decision. Despite the mounting pile of circumstantial evidence, including the gunshot residue found on Frankie S. clothing, the hidden wallet, and the forged checks, there was no direct forensic evidence, such as fingerprints on the murder weapon or an eyewitness, to definitively place the gun in her hand at the moment of the shooting. Furthermore, defense attorneys were prepared to argue that the gunshot residue on her clothes could have been transferred when she discovered her husband's body. Prosecutors were also highly conscious of the visual impact Frankie would have on a jury. At 83 years old, appearing frail and using a wheelchair in the courtroom, she presented an image of a harmless grandmother. There was a significant risk that a jury might feel overwhelming sympathy for her, potentially overlooking the heavy weight of circumstantial evidence. To ensure that justice was served and that Frankie was held accountable for her actions, the prosecution offered a plea agreement in June 2019. Frankie agreed to plead guilty to voluntary manslaughter. She received an active prison sentence of 84 months minimum to 113 months maximum. Having spent a significant amount of time in the Moore County Jail awaiting trial, she received credit for time served. Ultimately, she remained incarcerated until her release on October 2, 2023, having served approximately 7 years of her sentence. This tragic case offers profound insights into the psychology of financial exploitation and elder abuse, while highlighting the critical lessons necessary to prevent similar occurrences. A primary motive in this case, as is so often the true crime pattern, was financial desperation and the desire to conceal ongoing fraud. Individuals who engage in systemic deception often rely on a carefully constructed persona to disarm suspicion. In this instance, the harmless elderly grandmother stereotype served as a highly effective camouflage, allowing the perpetrator to operate undetected for years within her family and community. This case underscores the reality that criminals can exist in any demographic and that outward appearances can be deeply deceptive. To prevent such tragic outcomes, families and communities must practice active vigilance, particularly when elderly relatives enter new relationships later in life. While everyone deserves companionship and happiness in their golden years, it is essential to remain observant of rapid financial changes, sudden isolation from established family members, or the sudden appearance of heavy debts. Encouraging open communication, establishing shared oversight of financial accounts, and utilizing professional financial advisors can act as vital safeguards against exploitation. From an investigative standpoint, this case highlights the immense value of meticulous circumstantial building and financial forensics. When direct physical evidence is scarce, the careful reconstruction of financial transactions, telephone toll records, and timeline analyses becomes the cornerstone of a successful prosecution. Law enforcement agencies can accelerate the resolution of jhene complex cases by immediately securing bank records, conducting comprehensive background checks on all household members, and rigorously cross-referencing alibis against independent digital footprints. By combining technical forensic science, traditional community policing, and persistent dedication, justice can prevail, ensuring that those who seek to exploit and harm the vulnerable are ultimately held to account. The golden years of life are universally understood to be a period of hard-earned tranquility, a time when the tumultuous demands of youth and midlife career building finally give way to a gentle, predictable rhythm. It is a season of life meant for tending gardens, sitting on front porches, sharing memories with lifelong friends, and enjoying the quiet companionship of a spouse. In the peaceful community of Aberdeen, North Carolina, this was precisely the sort of existence that Dallas Leon Kellis had built for himself. Dallas was a man who embodied the traditional virtues of his generation, characterized by a quiet dignity, a strong work ethic, and an approachable, friendly demeanor that made him a beloved figure in his neighborhood and his local church. Yet, on the morning of July 20th, 2016, this picture of suburban peace was shattered in the most incomprehensible manner. The discovery of Dallas, deceased in his own home from close-range gunshot wounds, set off an investigation that would ultimately peel back the layers of a meticulously constructed persona to reveal a chilling tale of greed, deception, and cold-blooded manipulation. When looking at the statistics of violent crime, society often expects perpetrators to fit certain youthful, aggressive profiles, which is precisely why cases involving elderly defendants are so profoundly unsettling. The shock value of this case lies not only in the tragic loss of an innocent man, but in the striking contrast between the suspect and the crime itself. Investigating forces are trained to look past appearances, yet the human mind naturally struggles to reconcile the image of a frail elderly grandmother with the calculated execution of a sleeping spouse. To understand how such a tragedy could occur, one must look deep into the psychology of manipulation, the structural vulnerabilities of the elderly, and the critical loopholes that clever criminals attempt to exploit. By analyzing this case, we can glean vital lessons about the nature of human deception, the absolute necessity of rigorous forensic accounting, and the steps communities can take to protect their most vulnerable citizens from wolves who wear the softest of sheepskins. The initial call that set the investigative machinery in motion came in a tap moat, approximately 7:20 in the morning, on July 20th, 2016. The Moore County 911 Dispatch Center received a frantic, breathless call from Frankie Kellis, the 80-year-old wife of Dallas. On the recording, her voice trembled with panic as she told the dispatcher that she believed her husband was dead, pointing out that there was blood on his pillow. She sounded out of breath and utterly distraught, creating an immediate sense of urgency that prompted a rapid response from local law enforcement and emergency medical services. When the dispatcher, operating on standard emergency protocols, instructed Frankie to pull Dallas from the bed to attempt cardiopulmonary resuscitation, she quickly demurred, citing her advanced age of 80 years and her limited physical mobility. She painted a picture of herself as a helpless bystander, physically unable to render the very aid that might have saved her husband had he not already been beyond saving. Upon arriving at the immaculate residence, first responders were immediately struck by the somber reality of the scene. Dallas Leon Kellis was indeed deceased, but as the medical personnel began to examine him, they quickly realized that this was far from a natural medical event. There was indeed blood on the pillow, but a closer examination of the back of his neck and head revealed a small caliber injury that strongly resembled a gunshot wound. This discovery immediately transformed a standard medical response into a high-stakes homicide investigation. Crime scene tape was unfurled around the property. Witnesses were isolated, and investigators were brought in to meticulously document every inch of the home. It soon became apparent that Dallas had been shot at very close range, as evidenced by the powder burns on his clothing near the entrance wound, indicating a calculated and deliberate act. The absence of any weapon near the body confirmed that this was not a self-inflicted tragedy. To understand the profound loss felt by the community, one must look at the life Dallas Kellis had led. Born near the end of the Great Depression in rural North Carolina, Dallas was the youngest of 7 children. His childhood was marked by hardship, particularly after his father was tragically killed in an automobile accident in 1940, leaving his grandmother to raise the large family under incredibly difficult economic circumstances. These early challenges instilled in Dallas an enduring work ethic and a deep appreciation for the value of family and community. After graduating from high school in West End, North Carolina, he served his country in the United States Army, a period of service that further refined his disciplined and orderly approach to life. Upon returning to civilian life, he settled in Aberdeen and took a job as a machinist at a local textile mill, a position he held with pride and dedication for many decades. In 1968, Dallas married the love of his life, Louise Cole, a woman slightly older than him who had children from a previous marriage. Dallas embraced his role as a husband and stepfather with characteristic devotion. He was described by those who knew him as a sharp-dressed man, a dapper individual who took pride in his appearance and always presented himself with a neat, altered wardrobe. He and Louise built a comfortable, successful life together, centered around their beautiful home outside Aberdeen and their active involvement in their local church. For 41 years, they shared a harmonious partnership, enjoying the simple pleasures of yard work, church functions, and the company of family, until Louise passed away in June 2009. Dallas was heartbroken by her loss, but after a year of profound mourning, his infectious laugh and approachable nature began to return, making him one of the most eligible and respected gentlemen in his social circle. In 2010, Dallas reconnected with a woman from his past, Margaret Francis Bright, known to her family and friends as Frankie. Frankie had been an ex-girlfriend of Dallas during their 20s, and she had recently returned to North Carolina after the passing of her third husband. The rekindling of a romance after 50 years apart seemed like a beautiful, heartwarming story of a second chance at love during their golden years. To many, it felt like a natural progression for two people who had known each other in their youth to find comfort in one another. As they navigated the challenges of aging, they did not date long before marrying in February 2011. Reasoning that at their advanced age, there was no reason to delay their happiness. On the surface, their life together appeared to be the epitome of quiet retirement, filled with routine activities like watching television programs, working in the yard, and enjoying each other's company. Yet, behind this tranquil facade, a deadly dynamic was quietly developing. When investigators sat down with the newly widowed Frankie to piece together the events of that fateful morning, she offered a detailed and emotional narrative. She explained that she and Dallas had planned to attend a family funeral that day, prompting her to wake up around 5 in the morning to prepare. According to her account, she turned on the coffee pot and told Dallas she would prepare breakfast, but he supposedly requested a ham biscuit from McDonald's instead. Frankie claimed she drove to the local McDonald's, purchased the breakfast, visited the post office, and returned home. Upon her return, she noticed Dallas had not come to the kitchen. She went to collect the morning newspaper and when he still did not appear, she went to investigate, eventually discovering him dead in their bed. To support the theory of an outside intruder, Frankie pointed out that Dallas' wallet and his watch were missing from the nightstand, suggesting that a robbery had taken place while she was running her errands. This detail initially gave investigators a potential motive to explore. However, experienced detectives quickly noticed several glaring inconsistencies that did not align with a typical home invasion. A standard robbery usually involves some degree of forced entry, a struggle, or at the very least, a ransacked home where an intruder has frantically searched for valuables. In contrast, the Kellis residence was immaculate, organized, and perfectly clean. Nothing else of value was missing, and there were absolutely no signs of a struggle or forced entry. The physical evidence simply did not support the narrative of a random burglar who somehow slipped into the home, executed a sleeping man, stole only his wallet and watch, and left without leaving a single trace of disruption. As the investigation deepened, detectives realized that the key to solving the mystery lay in verifying every aspect of Frankie's alibi and examining her past. While security footage from the McDonald's did indeed confirm that she had purchased food that morning, her behavior during police interviews began to raise significant psychological red flags. Investigators noticed that during her conversations, she kept a washcloth in her hand, which she used to repeatedly and meticulously wipe her hands. This seemingly nervous habit had a critical forensic consequence, as it rendered the gunshot residue test performed on her completely inconclusive. In the world of criminal investigation, such subtle behavioral anomalies are often the first clues that a suspect is actively attempting to destroy trace evidence while maintaining a mask of grief and innocence. With the robbery theory looking increasingly doubtful, detectives began to canvass the neighborhood to see if anyone had noticed the suspicious individual Frankie claimed to have seen lurking in the area. Extensive searches of surveillance footage from a nearby convenience store, which captured hours of road traffic before and after the estimated time of the murder, yielded absolutely no evidence of any pedestrian or suspicious vehicle matching her description. However, a crucial breakthrough came from a next-door neighbor who recalled an event from a few weeks prior. The neighbor reported seeing a silver Mustang parked in Dallas's driveway and observed Dallas and another individual examining a silver handgun, specifically a revolver. The neighbor even recalled Dallas Test firing the pistol on his property. This was a massive revelation because Frankie had explicitly told investigators that they did not own any handguns, claiming only the presence of a shotgun and a .22 rifle that had clearly not been fired in years. This discovery begged the question of why Frankie would lie about the existence of a handgun in the home. It also led investigators to explore the family dynamics, particularly the relationship between Dallas and Frankie's grandson, Uriah. According to family members, there was significant tension and bad blood between Dallas and Uriah. Dallas, who valued order and hard work, strongly disapproved of Uriah's lifestyle and bad habits, to the point where Uriah was strictly banned from the residence. Detectives speculated that an argument might have occurred, or that Frankie had attempted to move Uriah into the home against Dallas's wishes. When they discovered that Uriah had actually flown into North Carolina on the very day of the murder, he became a prime suspect. However, a meticulous check of airline flight records revealed that Uriah was still in transit and had not yet arrived in the state at the time Dallas was killed, completely ruling him out as the physical perpetrator of the crime. The investigation took a dramatic turn 48 hours later when a distant relative of Frankie contacted the police with a startling tip. The relative warned investigators that Frankie was far from the sweet, helpless grandmother she appeared to be. According to this witness, Frankie was known to carry a revolver with her constantly and was a highly manipulative individual who would not hesitate to use violence if she felt threatened or exposed. This tip prompted detectives to look much deeper into Frankie's background, leading them to interview her granddaughters. What they uncovered was a shocking history of deception, crime, and domestic instability that completely shattered the carefully crafted persona of the innocent elderly widow. The granddaughters painted a portrait of a woman who had spent her entire life running from her responsibilities and manipulating those around her. Frankie had been married 4 times, leaving behind a trail of broken homes and abandoned children whom she played little to no role in raising. While she had attempted to position herself as a supportive figure to her grandchildren, her influence was deeply toxic. One granddaughter recalled that Frankie would actually teach her grandchildren how to shoplift when they were young, sending them into stores to steal items, and then pretending to be completely oblivious if they were caught. She used her sweet grandmotherly appearance as a shield to deflect suspicion, exploiting the natural societal bias that hesitates to suspect the elderly of criminal behavior. A comprehensive background check conducted by the police revealed that Frankie's criminal history was extensive and sophisticated. She had lived under multiple different aliases, utilized several different social security numbers and cards, and had a record that included charges for regular fraud, prescription fraud, shoplifting, and drug distribution. Most shockingly, investigators discovered that she had spent 7 years in a federal prison for drug charges, having only been released in 2010, shortly before she reconnected with and married Dallas. This revelation cast her sudden return to Dallas's life in a much more calculating light. She was not a sweet widow seeking a peaceful reunion, but rather a career criminal who had spent her life exploiting others and was now looking for a stable, financially secure target to fund her lifestyle. Armed with this new understanding of Frankie's true character, investigators executed a secondary search warrant at the Kellis residence. The results were immediate and damning. On the floor in front of the master closet, detectives located a pile of discarded clothing, including a blouse and shorts, which bore suspicious spots that appeared to be blood. Even more incriminatingly, when they searched her personal dresser drawers, they located Dallas' missing wallet and watch completely intact, with all of his credit cards and identification. The discovery of these items proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that the robbery narrative was a complete fabrication designed to mislead law enforcement and cover up a cold-blooded execution. With the robbery theory thoroughly dismantled, detectives turned their attention to the couple's financial records, seeking a concrete motive for the murder. What they found was a classic case of elder financial exploitation. Dallas had worked hard his entire life, accumulating a comfortable retirement and maintaining a meticulous financial ledger. However, since marrying Frankie, his accounts had been systematically drained. Investigators uncovered numerous cash advance checks written against his accounts, bearing signatures that were quite obviously forged when compared to Dallas' official bank cards. The financial records revealed that Frankie had run up approximately $39,000 in debt in a very short period, leaving Dallas's accounts riddled with insufficient funds and returned checks. Furthermore, Frankie's fraudulent activities extended beyond her husband. Investigators discovered that she had also targeted Dallas's elderly sister, LaRue Green, forging checks from her account as well. When detectives interviewed LaRue, she was shocked to learn that her checks had been stolen and cashed without her knowledge. Perhaps the most chilling financial detail came from the timeline of the phone calls on the morning of the murder. Phone records revealed that Frankie had called LaRue at 7:06 in the morning to inform her that Dallas had passed away. Yet she did not place the call to 911 until 15 minutes later at 7:21. This 15-minute discrepancy was a massive red flag. It proved that Frankie knew Dallas was dead well before she contacted emergency services, and her subsequent claims of attempting to perform cardiopulmonary resuscitation under the dispatcher's guidance were nothing more than a calculated theatrical performance. When the laboratory results on the discarded clothing returned, they provided the final physical link, confirming the presence of gunshot residue on the blouse and shorts Frankie had been wearing. As the police prepared to make an arrest, they discovered that Frankie had suddenly gone missing, fleeing the state. A tip soon arrived from a terrified family member in Georgia who reported that Frankie and her grandson Uriah had arrived at Moat, left her home unannounced, and were acting in an extremely suspicious and threatening manner. The relative recalled a terrifying moment when Frankie instructed Uriah to grab something from the car, which she believed was a firearm, prompting her to lock her doors and call the local sheriff's department. Although the pair fled before Georgia authorities arrived, North Carolina investigators now had a clear picture of a desperate fugitive on the run. Eventually, intelligence indicated that Frankie had returned to the Aberdeen area. Detectives set up surveillance on her residence and observed her attempting to sneak onto the property by driving through a wooded side road to avoid detection. When she pulled onto the main highway, officers initiated a high-risk traffic stop. Even in that tense moment, Frankie immediately reverted to her sweet, clueless elderly persona, acting entirely confused as to why she was being stopped and showing no emotion or outrage when she was placed under arrest for murder and forgery. The subsequent interrogation of Frankie was described by veteran detectives as one of the most difficult of their careers. She was a master manipulator, constantly attempting to control the narrative, deflect questions, and demand to know why she was being held. However, whenever investigators confronted her with the undeniable physical and financial evidence of her guilt, her sweet demeanor would instantly vanish, replaced by a cold, aggressive hostility that one detective described as resembling the devil himself. In a separate room, her grandson Uriah, though fiercely loyal and terrified of her, dropped a chilling hint about her past, suggesting that Dallas was not the first of her husbands to meet a suspicious end, pointing specifically to her second husband, who was cremated immediately after his sudden death, under highly questionable circumstances. Despite the wealth of circumstantial evidence, the prosecution faced a daunting challenge as the trial approached. In a modern legal landscape heavily influenced by what is known as the crime scene investigation effect, juries often expect high-tech, definitive physical evidence, such as matching ballistics or clear DNA profiles. In this case, there were no shell casings, and the actual murder weapon was never recovered. Furthermore, prosecutors had to consider the powerful psychological impact that an 83-year-old defendant in a wheelchair would have on a jury. The natural human inclination towards sympathy for the elderly could easily override circumstantial evidence, posing a high risk of acquittal. To ensure that justice was served and that a dangerous individual remained behind bars, prosecutors offered Frankie a plea deal in June 2019. She pled guilty to voluntary manslaughter and was sentenced to a minimum of 84 months and a maximum of 113 months in prison. With credit for the time she had already served in the county jail since her arrest in 2016, Frankie served approximately 7 years before her release in October 2023. While the sentence may have seemed lenient to those who loved Dallas, it ensured a guaranteed conviction and a period of guaranteed incarceration for a woman who had spent her life evading the consequences of her actions. This tragic case offers profound life lessons for communities everywhere regarding the prevention of elder abuse and financial exploitation. First and foremost, it highlights the danger of societal biases that lead us to overlook the criminal potential of individuals based solely on their age or appearance. Manipulation does not have an age limit, and career criminals often refine their deceptive techniques as they grow older, using their frail appearance as a highly effective disguise. Families must remain actively involved in the lives of their elderly loved ones, particularly when a new individual suddenly enters the picture after a long absence. Financial oversight is a critical protective measure. Regular audits of bank statements, joint monitoring of accounts, and open communication about financial health can prevent the systematic draining of an individual's hard-earned savings before it escalates to physical violence. For law enforcement, the successful resolution of this case underscores the vital importance of multidisciplinary investigation techniques. When physical evidence is limited, the combination of thorough neighborhood canvassing, behavioral analysis, meticulous timeline reconstruction, and deep forensic accounting becomes the cornerstone of a strong prosecution. By analyzing financial transactions, phone records, and historical background data, investigators can build an unbreakable chain of circumstantial evidence that exposes the truth behind even the most sophisticated deception. Dallas Leon Kellis was an honorable man who deserved to enjoy his golden years in peace. While his life was cut tragically short by a master manipulator, the dedication of the investigating forces ensured that the mask was ultimately ripped away, honoring his memory and demonstrating that justice, though sometimes quiet and methodical, will always prevail over the forces of greed and deception.